Oh, happy Monday, everybody. Let's just wait here for the make sure everything's loaded and kicked on. I know we're at a different time, but I'll be announcing more on that here in a second. All right, YouTube, are you awake? It looks like you're awake. Oh, wait a second. Wait for it. I think Rockfin won today. Rockfin won. Yeah. YouTube, here you are. But Rockfin beat you by a little bit. Just a little bit. I mean, it's not a competition. Not a competition. But as my headphones fall off my face. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon to all my fellow East Coasters. And quite frankly, good afternoon to all my West Coasters as well. I'll get this out of the way now. So we're coming at you at a different time. And we will be coming at you at this time every second Monday of the month, because it's MMT Monday, and this is the time that makes the most sense for my guest. So I know to everyone listening to the podcast later, this doesn't mean anything to you, but for everyone who catches this live, every second Monday, we'll be coming at you at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern, instead of our usual time of 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. or excuse me. Oh, that gets confusing, huh? Our usual time is 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Every second Monday of the month, we'll be coming at you on at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. All right, I got through it. First day of the week. Good to see everybody. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Our friends over at Indie Left. Indie Left is the only place to find all the content creators and streamers you know and love. They curate a list for you. They update it twice a day. They make it easy for you to find out everything they got going on and subscribe to their Discord community. Check them out at independentleft.media. That's independentleft.media. All right, without further ado, like I said, it's the second Monday of the month, which means it's MMT Monday. And you guys know me, I got an MMT guy. You know him. Please welcome him back. He is the host of the ActivistMMT podcast, and he's my MMT dude. Please welcome back, not the bad one, but the good one, Mr. Jeff Epstein. What's up, Jeff?
How you doing, Ron? Thank you so much for having me on again. I'd like to think of myself as your MMT dealer after our last conversation.
You deal economics information.
Sure. So how you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. And for anyone who maybe this is your first introduction to MMT, which I know that does still happen, just to give a very, 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 very quick summary, MMT stands for Modern Monetary Theory. And it is essentially the I wouldn't say theory, but it's basically applying the truths in our society. Like, it is a societal truth that the United States is a society that creates its own currency. And it is taking that concept and saying, well, what kind of a world could we live in if we actually utilize that truth for the betterment of society instead of just the betterment of Wall Street and the people who are running this country? Jeff, would you like to add anything to that very quick nuts and bolts definition?
Sure, that was pretty good. I would say MMT is by far, for me, and I think possibly for you, by far the most convincing economic theory, just by far. And what it shows is two things, which I said last time. I'll briefly say it now. Number one is our national governments are capable of not withholding what we desperately need. That's number one. They say that they can't do things because how are you going to pay for it? But the truth is they do not need to withhold what is desperately needed because they can very clearly do it. Education and the big ones, which I'm healthcare, education, and so on. And the other way I would say it is MMT shows that if we need something to be done, if something needs to be done, healthcare, education, and we have the things sitting around ready to do them, then we can do them. That's it. That's what MMT shows. And all the other theories you'll hear, how are you going to pay for it? Oh, inflation and so on. If we need something to be done, we have the things to do it with, we can do it.
Well, and it's kind of like the other thing that we'll say before we kind of jump into, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. I love what you said last time, where you said, look, because inflation's that argument that people always throw out there against MMT. And if you read Stephanie Kelton's most recent book, The Deficit Myth, she totally addresses MMT. MMT does not deny the existence of inflation, but it also recognizes the truth. And I love the way you put it. Inflation only happens as a result of crappy policy.
Or catastrophe.
Or catastrophe. That's the only thing that gives you inflation. Just
Yes.
creating the currency for things we need, that by itself doesn't cause inflation. It can if you have crappy policy around it, but it certainly doesn't have to.
Exactly.
And I love that. So let's jump into some of the stuff that you wanted to talk about today. You sent this to me. Now, we're not going to get into like this entire article. It's a very long read, but we'll kind of address some of the themes that are brought up here, and you can kind of unpack for me, what you see as relevant here and why this is important. This article is called "The Future of the Economy is Even More Dystopian Than You Think." And the author, Umar Hake, I'm probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize, but he kind of talks about how we have this big back order of things that people need. Getting supplies is difficult. This is not inflation. This is called a shortage. He uses an example of himself trying to get electronics, although a lot of people are dealing with I would say way more pressing things than just getting some audio equipment or something like that. Some people are dealing with food insecurity, housing insecurity. We have an upcoming housing crisis that's really going to be staring us in the face, likely at the end of September. So what's all going on here, Jeff? What do we mean when we say the future of the economy is more dystopian than we think?
It's really hard. I think I see ourselves as a society. We are living on nothing but beer, potato chips, bacon, and donuts, and smoking 3 packs a day. That's what we're doing.
I eat some vegetables, so speak for yourself. But
okay, as a society, I feel like that's kind of what we're doing. Being on fossil fuels like we are doing really bad things to ourselves. And if we don't stop that, then obviously something very, very bad is going to happen. So we really need to seriously consider stopping those bad things so these things don't happen. Because these 2 articles that I sent you are really scary stuff. And I think if we don't stop living this horrible way, then how could it not be that? And so, some examples of what he brings up in this article is he makes the point that it's not inflation. The problems that are going to be coming up are not inflation, because inflation is a very specific thing that happens because of catastrophe or bad human decisions. Most, roughly speaking, that's how inflation is caused. But when we have supply chains ruined, because whatever businesses, firms businesses go out of business because there was no demand during the crisis. And now all of a sudden there's all this demand. Well, they've lost some of their capacity during this time. So will we be able to have all these things, ramp up as quickly as we need them? But if they can't, that doesn't mean inflation. That means that we've made really bad decisions, some of which, we made in the past, and we can only do what we can to try and make up for it. Well, but we have the room to make better decisions going forward.
Well, let me ask you a question then, just for clarification. Wouldn't this, when people bring up concerns about inflation, couldn't they kind of go to you and say, well, wouldn't you consider what just happened, a catastrophe? We had a pandemic, and also we're making bad decisions. So how do we prevent inflation in this case?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is very seriously, Green New Deal, stopping fossil fuels, and starting to finally think about the second article, which I'm presuming we're not going to go into, but that's a much darker article. But that shows what's going to happen if we don't stop doing what we're doing. And I don't necessarily think his details are correct. I don't necessarily think his timeline is correct. But what is important for me about it is that he is thinking it through much farther than I've ever seen thought through before. And until we take the time to think through what these problems are and understand the depth of what we're facing, then we're never going to start to realize that we better start thinking of solutions, that we better stop doing the bad things we're doing and start thinking of the replacements to start improving things. Like, the public is just not aware, as I see it. The public is not aware of the depth of this very scary article. Which way am I pointing?
So this is what you're referring to. This is how our civilization ends.
This is a follow-up article to the one that we were just looking at. And this is a pretty terrifying article, and again, I don't think his details are necessarily totally correct, but he is the only one I see thinking this through to the bitter end. And until we get the true experts thinking these things through to the bitter end, that will finally show us the depth of what we're facing and give people the incentive to start pressuring those in power to start doing something about it. Because I don't see any of that happening.
Right. Well, he's basically saying coronavirus is just the beginning. And he brings up how the coronavirus depression, the last time we had a pandemic, it lasted for a while. It lasted most of a decade. And now, so we not only have that we're going to be feeling the effects of, we also have climate catastrophe, which they also point out in this article. So what are kind of the main bullet points here? I mean, when you talk about timeline and when you talk about all these, we don't have time to just sit down and read this whole thing. But what are kind of the bullet points that you wanna hammer on?
Very roughly, I think the article basically says the next 10 years will kind of be normal, feel normal, but we'll be fighting against these things behind the scenes of, heating temperatures, California going crazy, New York being flooded, Florida buildings collapsing, and all these things. And all of these different things are starting to happen in the background. And at some point, it's going to start affecting our daily lives. And then the next 10 years are going to be not good, of government starting to scramble for water and food and so on, using their resources not to just do daily stuff, but start to scramble for very basic needs. And then the next 10 years after that is just, he calls it lights out. I won't even go into it. And it's just like, these are thinking it through on our current path. And we really start to need to think of changing that current path.
So basically, within the next 30 years, there will be a total societal collapse if we don't change course. If we had to sum it up in one sentence.
That's pretty much what this article says. And again, I don't necessarily think his exact details or timeline may be correct, but I think he's in the ballpark and he's the only one thinking about it. And until we get the true experts really going and thinking about it, like a Manhattan Project for this kind of stuff, then nobody's going to change their habits, and what's scary, one scary thing for me is that it's not going to take that much for people to start to be worried about this, to start panicking, because
I don't see how they aren't already.
Well,
I mean, dude, like, look, we're going to go to New York here in a second. The subway flooded in New York. Where I live in California is on fire every freaking year. A building collapsed in Miami. How are you not panicking already?
That's true. That's true. What's scary for me personally, particularly, is that we have bulk stores. We have grocery stores on, many grocery stores in every city. We have box stores in every city, hardware stores in every city, with things piled high, everything piled high. And I just see we are spoiled that we expect these things to be around. And until we start thinking about like getting used to basically living with less, that when it comes to the point where we can't have these box stores anymore, where things can't be piled high, sky high anymore with all of these things that we don't really need, we could certainly continue to live no problem in that situation. But we are not prepared for that as a society. We expect to be spoiled, and that's going to scare people. I believe that's going to scare people.
Yeah, you know what? My one small pushback against that is that, and I'm all about all of us doing the absolute best we can as individuals. And I see that as important. And I try to make the best consumer decisions I can as an individual. But to place it all on individuals, I think is really overlooking. And I know this wasn't your intention, but that really overlooks the true polluters of this planet, which is the war machine, which is the, huge corporations that are wrecking this planet for their profits. And if nothing is done about that, we can avoid big box stores till we're blue in the face. It ain't going to make a very big difference.
I agree. But I still think that, yes, we have to change those systemic, larger consumers of all. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's not on the individual. However, I think we are at the point where soon enough, we are going to have to start using less.
Mm-hmm. Well,
significantly less. Like the IPCC, the new IPCC report that was leaked says that switching to electric cars is not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it.
Yeah. I mean, unless we had done it what, 50 years ago.
Of course.
I think had we done it in like the 60s, we'd be okay. But
of course, yeah. I mean, Bernie's Green New Deal plan, I remember, was very bold. It was very bold, but it had electric cars. But I think what he did was basically saying electric cars, it's too much change for people, to think of it. We have to get off cars completely. We have to become more local, and so I think it was, overall his Green New Deal was very bold, and he was just like, what, I think, in my speculation is that, what, this plan is overall very bold. That car thing is going to become so obvious that it's really not going to make a difference to put it in there, because people will be comforted knowing that, I can switch to an electric car.
Well, I think that, switching to an electric car is definitely helpful, totally.
Yes.
But we do need to go a step further, and especially in like the digital village that we find ourselves in now, and kind of rethinking what it means to go to work and rethinking what it means to kind of participate in society. And I think that a lot of people are embracing that. I think we've already started to see that change. As a country, we have spread out a little bit because people are realizing, I'm going to work from home indefinitely. I want to go somewhere where I can have some space and I can have a nice house and I can kind of just have what I need all around me. And more people are doing that. I know that sort of thing doesn't apply to everyone. There's plenty of jobs and occupations out there where working from home is not an option, like something in food service or something like that, obviously. But I think wherever it is an option, it's slowly becoming more and more the norm instead of the exception. And I really hope that continues.
I hope so too. I think there's really no choice but to get more local in everything, in growing things local, educating kids local, recreation local. I don't see a way around that as being part of the solution.
Well, and honestly, you get a better quality of life in so many ways. I try to eat local as much as I possibly can. I get as much as I possibly can from my farmer's market. And, I even, I'll go to my local grocery store, but I try to get as little as I can from there and as much as I can from the farmer's market. And you're getting better quality stuff that's better for you, and it's direct from your farmer.
Agreed. And actually the additional benefit is you get to know your neighbors more. You get to become part of your community more, which is a very big deal.
Oh, absolutely, man. And it's one of those things too, like you I'll share this as a side, like as far as like the communal element of a farmer's market. During the, shutdown, there was this brewery that was at our local farmer's market. And they just, because hey, they couldn't be open. So they were probably thinking outside the box. How can we kind of just keep our business going? Because, our government decided to just leave everybody out in the cold instead of actually taking care of people like other governments did.
Yep.
But so they came to our farmer's market, and I thought that is so smart, because now, like, here's the thing. They're located in an area called Lomita. I live in a neighborhood called San Pedro, and Lomita is not necessarily a part of the area that people are going to seek out. But what they did was so smart, because now you have all these people in my neighborhood who appreciated them being here and are now going to go out of their way to patronize their brewery.
It's smart.
It's
smart. Something that's not usually in a farmer's market. It's unusual to see that.
Totally.
That's a neat thing.
And it was just so smart. Because I bought a lot of their beer and they make a good product. It saved me, a trip. It's like, hey, especially during the pandemic, I'm not going to speak for you, but I tied a few more back than I typically do, because it's one of the ways you coped with all this.
I'm becoming more comfortable.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely, it was one of those things. Of course, I'm going to have a drink tonight. What else? I haven't left my house in months. I'm gonna have a drink tonight. But yeah, so it was really smart, and now people are going to go out of their way to like patronize that brewery. So yeah,
it's a very smart thing to do.
So let's go to New York. You shared this with me. This is oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Let me scroll down here. New York City subway flooding demonstrates the transit system vulnerability to climate change. So climate change reporting has had plenty of big stories to chase as of late, and the flood in New York is one of them. I mean, and you would see that. A transit source said the storm caused 110 scheduled trips to be canceled and 116 trains to arrive late. The rain also added to the mess at flooded stations as crews encountered obstacles well en route. They were trapped in traffic and because of closed roads. Because obviously they're trying to pump trucks and equipment to those locations. It's not like they can just bail out and walk. And we are witnessing a moment where there's going to be more and more extreme precipitation. I mean, when you saw that, what was your reaction? Like when you saw those videos of people just wading through water, getting off the subway, like what was your thought? Just as a human, like what was going through your mind?
I just think of, we're obviously going to be facing some cities going underwater, but going underwater doesn't necessarily mean like the comic book going underwater. It means in New York can't function without its subway. A big part of New York can't function without its subway. And I believe it's true for the airports as well, that they require so it's like the city requires that subway, even though you don't see water above ground necessarily. If that subway system starts not working, I think that's a pretty serious problem. I think basically it's like cities are more sensitive than, we're not going to see water going up to the second floor of any high rises. We're going to see subway systems that's what's going to start to strain cities. And that's pretty scary. It's like, how many years can they keep patching this up like this?
Well, that's the thing too. They literally do just patch it up. And it's almost like, I feel like people are in this state of denial. And, a climate scientist named Peter Kalmus comes up on my show sometimes, and he talks about just the different levels of climate denialism there are. And I feel like we're all guilty of it to some extent, myself included. But one of those forms of climate denialism is just, quote, patching it up, because people just kind of see things as an episode. Everything's an episode. Oh, we have this heat wave in the Northwest, but it's going to go away. And then we're going to get a window air conditioner unit from now on. Oh, man, we had some really bad rain. The subway is flooded. All right, well, we got to patch it up and fix this up. And, wow, what a lot of rain. That was crazy. No one really goes big picture and goes, the climate is changing. These heat waves are going to be more and more frequent and more severe. The climate is changing. Precipitation is going to be more severe. So we're going to get this type of rain more frequent. And the subway system can't handle it. What do? Because we can't just lose our subway system. We can't literally let our subway system go under. Those are the conversations that aren't happening.
That goes back to what that scary article was doing. He thought it through. And maybe he doesn't have it exactly right, but he thought it through, and it feels like a very good, kind of ballpark estimate. And again, it's that what experts are being sent out to analyze the bigger picture of these situations, the bigger picture of New York, the bigger picture of the entire country, of how we're going to deal with these things. And I think it's kind of related to that. It's like, what can people think except for patch it up? What kind of power do we have to do except for patch it up? People in power are the only ones that can do the things that are bigger than patching it up.
Yeah, well, and getting on what you said about, like, oh, he may not have had the timeline right, he may not have had this right. Nobody knows those answers yet. So those are answers.
Nobody's looking into it. It's
well,
like,
yeah, no kidding.
I refuse to call the doctor because I don't want to know what my problem is. I mean, that's...
Yeah. Well, but even the people who are, it's like we can't to the second have a totally clear answer. However, you're not going to solve anything if you don't address the severity of the problem. And that's something we know. We know, like we don't know exactly how many feet the sea level is going to rise. We have a range, but we can't tell you the exact thing. We can't tell you exactly when Miami's probably going to go underwater. We don't really know those answers. But what we do know is the severity of the problem. So pretending otherwise, or just kind of like, oh, we'll patch the subway up, that's where we're making all the wrong decisions.
This makes me think of asbestos and smoking and cell phones and global warming. We have to keep analyzing it. We need to keep analyzing it before we can't just jump and solve a problem that we're not totally certain is there. And it's like these kinds of problems can't be determined to 100% certainty. There's no such thing as 100% certainty, but we can be sure, we can be reasonably confident that we have asbestos. We can be reasonably confident that asbestos should not be used as fake snow in people's houses. We can be reasonably confident that smoking, if you choose to do it, whatever, but smoking causes problems and probably shouldn't be promoted by doctors. We can be confident that climate change is something that is so serious that we should be taking a broader look at it. And the people that resist that, some of a significant amount of them, I believe, we have to keep analyzing this. We have to keep, let's not rush to judgment. Let's keep analyzing this. And it's really running the clock so asbestos companies can profit. So tobacco companies can profit. And now so fossil fuel companies can profit. And even just more broadly, the powerful in general.
That is the ultimate deflection, isn't it? We need to look into it more.
It really is.
We need to, hey, why don't we just legalize cannabis? Why don't we? Well, because I get a bunch of money from the pharmaceutical industry, so we have to look into it more. I don't
exactly.
I'm not sold on the science yet. No, you're sold on it. You just want to.
And it's even more than that, because fossil fuel companies, we know, are deliberately, what do you call it? Faking the science. That's not the right term, but are deliberately putting false science out there.
They're fudging the numbers. I mean, they're what they're doing is dictionary propaganda, because one of the forms of propaganda is when you start with a conclusion and only allow data that supports that conclusion, which, by the way, is the total opposite of science. So when you have these, quote, scientists who are in fact scientists, they just don't have consciences, and they accept money from Exxon, or they accept money from an oil company or whatever, and they rearrange their data in a way that says, oh, we have nothing to worry about. They manipulate the data to say, oh, no, the climate change, I'm not even convinced it's a thing because of where my paycheck comes from.
So if someone manipulates that science, obviously manipulates that science and propagandizes, fakes false science, and then on the other hand, they also say, we need to keep analyzing this because we're not sure about the science.
Right.
Then that makes it pretty clear that they are sure about the science. They want to make the science appear to be what they want it to be.
Oh, totally, man. Yeah. Absolutely. And you see that. And I think you see different levels of that. I mean, what we just talked about is the most kind of black and white example of it, where you literally have these paid off scientists who are spreading deliberate misinformation, trying to downplay climate change.
Right.
But I would say the kind of less severe and less in your face version of that is what we see every day, where, oh, we're going to do something by like 2050. That's kicking a can down the road.
Yeah.
And we all know this.
Yeah. What's the Biden administration goal of 0% emissions or zero net emissions by 2050, when the scientists say we need to be zero total emissions by 2030. Oh, that's great. Thanks, Biden. And you saw that tweet. I sent a tweet to you by Biden. He basically said something like, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's, I forget the term, like predatory or something like that.
Yeah, I saw his tweet.
And it's like capitalism is predation almost by definition. So what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So we're getting punched in the face 10 times a day. So Biden is going to make it 9 times a day. Thank you, Biden.
I am so tired of people sugarcoating what capitalism really is. And that is, you see that every freaking day. It's not capitalism, it's corporatism. It's predatory capitalism. And even I, like years prior, used to fall for that kind of bullshit. But eventually you really just look at things for what they are, and you kind of just trace back the timeline, and you realize, no, this is capitalism. It's not predatory capitalism. It's not corporatism. It's capitalism. Capitalism means private ownership and people with power make the rules. This is capitalism. You
I
don't need
learned-
any other descriptor. It's freaking capitalism. It does the same thing every time it's been tried in human history. If capitalism was a car, it would break down every 2,600 miles at best. It'd be a freaking lemon. And it's a terrible, absolutely terrible economic system.
I learned something interesting. That'll come back to me in a moment, but freedom. Capitalism is freedom. Freedom for all, right? You hear
freedom
capitalism,
to starve.
free market, it's freedom for all. And if you don't want capitalism, then you don't want freedom. And it's like freedom for all is actually, in reality, freedom for the rich to exploit the poor. That's what freedom, or what do you call it? There's a term kind of related, like liberty. Exactly. Liberty is freedom is in reality, freedom for all is in reality freedom for the rich to exploit the poor, because it is freedom in our current state. Meaning it's like, those who got in first got lucky and got all the stuff, and they're the powerful people, they have all the wealth, and everybody else doesn't have nearly as much, has hardly anything. But now everybody in their same state, we're all free. So it's like saying, I've already gotten 5 feet before the finish line. You are before the start line with a brick wall and glass on the ground. It's a fair race if we start right now. This is a fair race. Everybody is free. Let's just ignore the fact that the elite are only 5 feet before the finish line and everybody else is behind the start line. So that's like kind of the idea of this race is on. We're all on an even level, as long as you ignore the amazing advantage that the few have and the amazing disadvantage that everybody else has.
What a system, man. What a system. So let's go here. This is the other thing that you shared with me. The worst is yet to come. Draft UN climate report.
30 years.
Drastic changes over 30 years. Climate change will fundamentally reshape life on Earth in the coming decades, even if humans can tame planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions, according to a landmark draft report. Species extinction, more widespread disease, unlivable heat, ecosystem collapse, cities menaced by rising seas. These and other devastating climate impacts are accelerating and bound to become painfully obvious before a child born today turns 30.
My children will be 40 before they turn 40. And I keep talking with people, keep talking with other parents, like in my interviews on my podcast. And it's like, what do you do as a parent to balance allowing your children to be children and not giving them false, pie in the sky, life will be just as normal as everybody else? It's like, how do you balance that?
How do you do that? I'm curious. How do you do that?
I am starting to tell my older one, who's turning 15 tomorrow, that in about 15 years, I mean, how can I know? But my best estimate is in around 15 years, I think things are going to start to become pretty messy. And my 12-year-old, I'm much more vague with him, but I'm kind of gradually ramping up to that, just to try and tell them that when they become adults, young adults, I think this world will be nothing like it is now. Nothing. And let's hope it's either going to be controlled. Big changes are coming. I'm pretty sure that we've talked about this before. Big changes are coming, whether we like it or not. Now we have the choice to make those changes be controlled or be uncontrolled. Once something's going to happen, we don't know what. On our current path, it doesn't feel very likely that it's going to be controlled. But whatever the case is, in like 20, 30 years, 15 years, whatever, life is going to be very different here. We are really spoiled. We are really spoiled. The generation, our parents' generation, incredibly spoiled. They live their entire lives spoiled. Big houses. I mean, 5,000 square foot houses, flying all around the world, whenever they want. And, it's like they live their whole lives like that. We lived our first half of our lives like that. And now it's pretty obvious that the second half of our lives are not going to be like that. And now my kids, I want them to feel free and not burdened and not overly burdened. But I remember a story when I was a kid. I remember there was a walking bridge over a road, and I was like, I'm worried that's going to fall. And I was told, don't worry, they would not have even built it if they knew it was going to fall. Don't worry about it. And I knew that there was something wrong with that. It was like promising what can't be promised, you know? And so I was riding in a car one day with a big log going through the car, and I was afraid my head was going to get smashed against this log, and if we got into an accident. And the adult in the car said, don't worry about it. I promise you, I won't get into an accident. How can you promise that? Even if you drive perfectly, you can't promise that for everybody else in the world. And so that is very important to me, to allow my kids to be kids, but to not pretend that we're not in for big changes. It's a real struggle, but I feel like I'm doing it okay.
I can only imagine, man. I don't have kids, so I have no. I have
You
no
kids you care
clue.
about, I'm sure, right?
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, family members and stuff like that, but it's not. I mean, it's not my place to have that conversation with them. And most of my, like most of my friends and family who are having kids now, their kids are very young. I mean, like some of my newer cousins, they're like under 5 and stuff. So I think that might
You
be a
don't bring
little soon
no.
to have those conversations.
Yeah,
But
of course.
but teenagers, I get. I mean, yeah, I get like starting to bring up those types of topics with them, and it's very heavy because, how do you do that? And it's I can only imagine. I mean, I really can. I mean, I can only imagine. And it's one of those things where it's like you can't. One of the things I personally would have a very hard time with, and I don't know if I'm ever going to have kids. I'm probably not, but I'm not positive on that. But if I ever
Don't
did,
have more than one.
well, I would want to have
1
more
plus
than
1 is 7.
yeah. Well, I'd want to have more than one because I'd want them to have a sibling. I wouldn't want them to be an only child. So I would want to have 2.
Okay.
It's either going to be 2 or 0. Any more than 2, I think that's just too much. And
two is genuinely is it works. They get along. They get along 2/3 of the time. They bicker 1/3 of the time, but overall, it is a good thing.
Fair. I mean, yeah. I mean, that tracks. I mean, I grew up with one sibling, and it worked out just fine. And I think that's the way to be. But I think it would really bother me a lot if I wasn't able to give them just as good of a chance, if not a better chance than I had. And I don't know if I'd be able to do that because of
How can
societal
you,
things
as
out
an
of our
individual? Yeah,
control.
exactly. How can you? You can do the best you can within a corrupt society, and that really very, very limits you.
Whew. Yeah, that's heavy stuff. Well,
But that said, we need these kids to know that this is coming and be ready to stand up. We need them. And last week I said, I'm against technology, and my kid has an iPad, but we're very, very strict of a couple hours a day or 3 hours a day, whatever it is. And and that is related to not wanting to distract them from this really huge reality that's coming. And I also said, I'm very hesitant to help him become a programmer. And yes, some programming is good, but overall, I just feel like if it's 15 years from now, is programming really going to, is programming really what we want our kids to be doing? Thinking about really what's coming. I just don't see that.
I disagree with you a little bit there because I think that technology is going to be a big part of the conversation, not just as far as solutions are concerned, but also just societally. So I think like to kind of discount the technology we have is just, I mean, first of all, it's just the world doesn't work that way. I mean, people have tried to discount technology through the generations, going as far back as writing. And the world doesn't work that way. The technology's there. You can either embrace it and adapt to it and see it as a tool that has some value, or you can try to dismiss it. And the latter seems very counterproductive. I'm not saying, or nor am I implying at all, and people who watch this show know this is the case because I've repeated this many times, and you and I have had this conversation.
Mhm.
I'm not implying that let's just lean on technology to deal with climate change and we're going to be fine. Bill Gates is going to do something cool. I'm not implying that at all. But would I say that technology has no seat at the table at all? No, I wouldn't say that either. I do think it's going to play a role. How exactly? I don't know the answer to that. But I do think it's going to play a role in how we are able to adapt to what will be a new climate.
I agree with that. I would just I think I can clarify what I'm saying is I agree. Technology is obviously going to be a big part of this. I think the technology that my kid leans towards is not those more helpful things. It's like more video game programming,
how do you
video
know? I
game
mean, he's
stuff,
only
and
15. How do you know?
that
You don't
that's
know.
maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. We'll see if he convinces
he's
me
a
otherwise.
kid.
Well,
you can't. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't like go to a 15-year-old and be like, well, what do you want to do with the programming? Do you want to start getting carbon out of the air, or do you want to design a game? He's 15. Don't
maybe
put
that's
that
true.
on him
And
yet.
maybe that's true, and I'll
That
actually
game
give you
could lead him into something better.
exactly. I think maybe I'll give you that maybe even though all he knows now is video games, that skill could potentially help him with the good kind of technology. Maybe so. I'll give you that.
It's possible, man. I mean, I'm not telling you how to parent, but yeah, I mean, that's possible. I mean, usually it's something, and I'm not a computer guy, so I can't speak from experience, but like people I know, like that I grew up with that have gone on to be, computer gurus, or whatever you want to call it, engineers even. Yeah, a lot of times it started with something like they got really addicted to something like The Sims, and then they, oh, I can have a job kind of like this.
I could
And
buy that.
obviously you find out it's not the same as the video game, but
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I
know,
can buy
it
that.
started something positive for you.
I can buy that. I can buy that. I will think about it. I'm hesitant. I gotta admit, I'm hesitant, but I will think about it. I will definitely think about
It'll
it.
be funny if like your kid gets like really into video games and then it's like it has the opposite effect. It's like, way to go, Ron. Way to go. He thinks zombies are real now because of you.
Yeah, you might as well kill the virtual ones because you can't kill the real ones.
So tying this back to MMT, the worst is yet to come. We got a lot coming up in 20 years. And really something that really helps is if a mass society just embraced the idea that there's no affordability questions here. Which, first of all, the fact that they even bring that up with a straight face, which you and I see this every day. People in government, especially here in the United States, they kind of just shrug and they go, well, I don't know if we can afford to do anything about climate change. Right. Just the fact that sentence is uttered.
What? Who's in charge of our climate change for the U.S.? What's his name? The Swift boat candidate from that was, I think, against McCain. What's his name? Whatever. Biden appointed whatever his name is, the old presidential candidate who was the swift boated guy. It's John Kerry. John Kerry is in charge of the U.S. fight against climate change. John Kerry is in charge of that entire mission for the entire country. John Kerry said, governments are not going to play a role in mitigating climate change. That's a quote. A quote. Wow. Is John Kerry said, the guy in charge of the United States effort against, mitigating climate change, governments are not going to play a role in mitigating climate change. And that's the guy that Biden appointed. So yeah, Biden has done some unquestionably good stuff, but nothing to address this. Nothing. Well, so it's like, I'm glad that he did Juneteenth, but he didn't do the underlying stuff. I think we spoke about this. He did Juneteenth, but he didn't do any of the really important stuff that leads to the racism. He just symbolized Juneteenth that we're gonna honor this. We're just not gonna do anything that causes it. We're not gonna change anything.
And you can drawing that to climate change as well. You can see some parallels there. Granted, ending Keystone XL was definitely a lot more than a symbolic action. It was good. I'm glad that it happened. Yes. Now, a more kind of slightly more than a symbolic action, getting back into the Paris Climate Accord. Am I glad we're back in there? Of course I am. Am I glad the Keystone XL pipeline stopped? Of course I am.
Yes.
But you're not doing anything to address true systemic change and to really get off of fossil fuels. And also, you're not doing anything about Line 3. Is it great you shut down Keystone XL? Yes, but you're
Line
not
3.
Line 3 pipeline, the pipeline going through Minnesota.
Okay.
You're not doing anything systemically about what just happened in the Gulf of Mexico. You're
The
taking
fire
down
in the water.
Yeah, you're taking down these statues, which is I'm glad to see them being taken down. I think that's the right thing to do. I'm glad they're gone. But you're taking down statues while you're simultaneously giving cops more money and not doing anything about the white supremacy problem in law enforcement, which is a systemic rot.
It is reducing 10 punches in the face a day to 9 or 8. That's what it's doing. And when we need to get to, how about not being punched in the face? That's what we need. It is releasing pressure to prevent the pitchforks for another month. It is not solving problems.
And it's also, because it's attacking a few symptoms without going to the root. And that is very much the United States way. That is very much the United States way. I mean, I think that sums up the Democratic Party very well. And I think that just sums up the system as a whole. We'll take a look at some of these symptoms. We'll do some performative things. It'll be very marginal. It'll be nowhere close to enough. And you're supposed to shut up and be thankful for it. And if you're not, you're going to get another Trump. That's not a winning society. That just isn't. That's a failed state.
And that's how the Great Depression and that's how the Great Financial Crisis happened, is they dealt with these symptoms that superficially seemed like they solved problems. And they did solve problems. They solved smaller problems, but they didn't take care of the symptomatic stuff underneath, which finally blew up into the Great Depression, which finally blew up into the Great Financial Crisis.
So I guess to talk briefly some solutions, we focused a lot on climate.
This is a pretty heavy episode.
But we focused a lot on climate, which I think is real important. And again, the overwhelming parallel here is that there's no affordability issues anywhere. We can be doing as much as we possibly can, which would lead to be doing more. If we were putting all of our resources into managing climate change. I think manage is the right way to put it, because you're not going to stop it. It doesn't work that way. But we can manage the effects of it to some extent. We can behave as well as we can to make sure it's not as drastic as it has the potential to be. And if we were doing everything we could in our power, it would lead to more solutions, because you would have people doing the R&D necessary. You would have people seeking solutions from every different angle, combating it from the behavior standpoint, from the alternative logistic needs standpoint, from getting off of fossil fuels completely standpoint, from ending corporate corruption standpoint, from the standpoint of technology, making our societies more local. I mean, any and all of the above. And the thing is it's not like we're going to be living these primitive ways at any point unless society collapses. They're going to find solutions. That's the thing. I would be fine, even as somebody who, when the world is open, travels for said work because I tour. I would feel so much relief if we just ended all fossil fuels tomorrow, because I would know that there would be solutions around the corner. They would figure things out. And it's not like you're never going to see anywhere outside of your neighborhood unless you bike really hard. That's not going to happen. They're going to have solutions. There's just not a sense of urgency. We could get off fossil fuels tomorrow, and in a short amount of time, I think we would have figured almost everything out. But
the point is
not there.
There's no urgency because we're not talking about getting off of it.
Yeah.
And getting off of it, committing to getting off of it in 5-10 years, even if it's not realistic, we're going to get off fossil fuels in 5 to 10 years. We're going to do a moonshot. We're going to do a,
Hail Mary.
When we did I said it earlier, when we did the creating the nuclear bomb, the Manhattan Project, we're going to do a Manhattan Project to get off of fossil fuels and to figure out alternatives and to determine what our societies are going to be like. Obviously, we could do that if we have a problem to solve and we have the things and people to do it, ready to do it. Of course, we can do it. Money is not an issue for the federal government, for the national government. So until we do that, we're not going to know. So what I was going to say is that will give us the incentive to start thinking of these solutions. Because why do we need to think of these solutions? Because we have all these things. We can still take our Hummer to the gas station and fill it up for $3 a gallon. Well, that doesn't give me too much incentive to find a smaller car. We got to come up with that incentive to scare people scare is the wrong term, but to get people to understand the depth of this in a controlled fashion if these consequences are going to happen in a controlled fashion. MMT shows that if we have a problem and things to do it, we can obviously do it. That is a non-issue. And it's just a matter of making the decision to do it. And those who don't want to do it and benefit from not doing it are those who have the levers of power. So, it's a pretty hard situation right now.
And honestly, man, the other side of it too, and just to inject a little bit of optimism in here, I think that there's also the opportunity component of all this. And I think that people are really welcoming of that in many ways. It's not a coincidence that the most winning campaign slogan of both of our lifetimes was 3 words: yes, we can. Now, we don't need to go into what ended up happening there. That's not my point. My point is not what ended. But my point is that yes, we can is a winning message to people. People don't want to have uncertainty for their children as to what kind of world they're going to be able to live in. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants education to become solely for the elite. Nobody wants, people to go into medical bankruptcies. Nobody wants any of these things. Nobody wants our endless freaking wars. Again, except for the small handful of people that are profiting off of all this and are propagandizing everyone else. But at the end of the day, no one wants this freaking stuff. And bold climate action and status quo shifting climate action would lead to systemic change in so many other areas too. And the other alternative is we ain't going to be here much longer.
Yeah.
Where can people go to learn more about you, Jeff?
You can listen to my podcast on ActivistMMT.org. Click on podcast, all episodes. You can find me on Twitter, ActivistMMT. Find me on Facebook, ActivistMMT, spelled out like that. And that's where people can find me.
Right on. Shout out to Brent McKinney. Thank you very much for the super chat contribution. You say, Ron, please look up the MEER, MEER Reflection Project as a crowdsourced first principles based solution for climate chaos mitigation. I am not familiar with that, Brent. I've never heard of it, but yeah, I will have to take a look into it. But I'm not familiar with what that is, but I will have to look into it. And Jeff, I forget if we did this the last time. I'm drawing you don't have pets, right? You're a
I have I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We talked about this.
Boys, yeah. No, I do not have a pet. Yeah.
All right. Well, your 12-year-old and 15-year-old, they say, Dad, let us play video games, for crying out loud. I promise I'll do something constructive with it when I'm older. It'll lead me. I'm gonna build amazing things. I'm gonna build solar and
Uncle
wind.
Ron said it was okay.
In the meantime, let me play video games. So that's what they say. And Lucy says meow. And she says hi to the kids. And she says, pet me the right way and I will purr. Pet me the wrong way and I will hiss at you. Lucy's a little impatient with younger people, actually. I don't know why. She's always been that way. I don't know why that is. But my cat is, I think teenagers are fine. But she doesn't like kids for some reasons. I think really? It's because... Yeah.
Did you have her at birth?
Yeah. Well, she was a stray. So I think she was, she was about 6 months old when she showed up, and we've been together ever since.
I wonder if she had a bad experience that kind of makes her again.
I don't know.
Scared of kids or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But she's not scared of them.
Well,
she just doesn't like them.
Okay.
She is not scared at all.
I didn't realize you meant my boys.
No, not yours. I just mean kids in general. Like she, yeah, it's weird. I mean, she hasn't. The only time she's ever encountered like younger kids is usually when it's like a friend's child or something. And she's so nice to adults. And so it'll be funny, like a friend might come over and they meet Lucy and Lucy's so nice to them. And so they're like, oh, she's such a sweet cat. Then they bring their kid over and they're like, oh, go say hi to Lucy. Lucy's such a sweet cat. And then Lucy wants nothing to do with that chat. They're like, Lucy's. And I'm like, I know, I don't, she doesn't like kids. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I guess she's just used to only adults.
She knows what she likes.
Apparently, man. But she says hi. I'm sure 12 and 15, that's old enough. Lucy would be copacetic with them. So Lucy says hi, and she says meow. And Jeff says, do something about climate change, learn MMT.
Let me just say very briefly, I'm glad that we kind of went in depth with this. You know, everything has been said. I don't feel like, you know, reliving this over and over again is really going to be necessary, because it's all, you know, I think we kind of encompassed the whole thing. I released an episode, 4 ago, where I spoke pretty in depth and pretty dark about this particular subject. So it's kind of been on my mind. But no, I don't really, this has been more in depth than I've spoken about this subject in a long time. And I'm kind of glad that we did it. You know, I don't think we should do it every time, but I'm kind of glad that we did it.
No, we'll do other topics, man. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's good. You know, you really do need to come to terms, and I feel like I'm kind of coming to terms. But you know, it's been said, and you don't need to keep saying it over and over again. So.
Right on, Jeff. Well, we will be back together. I'll be back tomorrow and Get Your News On with Ron, but Jeff will be back on the second Monday of next month for our MMT Monday, which again, to everyone who catches the stream live, it starts at a different time. It starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. It'll be that way every second Monday of the month. And say
goodbye to all this, because if everything goes well, I'm going to be in a completely new place for next month.
That's
so
right.
Wish me luck.
That's right.
Oh, boy.
Jeff just got a house, everybody, barring no crazy surprises. So we wish him luck there.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
And, you know, he's going to have a new house where his kids are going to be playing video games, and he's not going to be able to catch them. They're going to have a nice.
And I hopefully will not be sweating the entire time, dripping the entire time.
Right on, Jeff. Good to talk to you, buddy. Lucy says meow. We'll be back tomorrow. And Jeff says learn MMT, and I say learn MMT, and we say peace. Peace, y'all.